So the other day, Microsoft and Playground Games finally pulled back the curtain on Fable. And this has been a long time coming, not just because Fable 3 came out back in 2010. So by the time this Fable game comes out, it'll have been just about 16 years. And I know there was a Connect Fable game, The Journey, but do we really count that? I mean, Lionhead was closed down in 2016, which is very unfortunate because to a lot of us that pretty much shut the door on Fable until Playground Games picked up the mantle, and it's been 5 years since their initial teaser, but here we are now with a showing that I got to say was quite impressive. And while there were a lot of promises that were made, if Playground Games can pull this off, stepping out of their comfort zone with something like a racing game with Forza Horizon, that might put them as one of the top developers, one of the top studios in the industry. But first, we got to get there. However, there were a lot of details that were shared not only in that overview trailer, but also in an interview that was released on Xbox's website with Ralph Fulton, who is the game director. So I pulled a bunch of notes from both, and I wanted to go over that here today, along with some of my thoughts. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. So to add a little bit of context here, years ago, we found out through a job listing that Fable would be using ForzaTech, the engine behind the Forza games. And that was kind of weird. It was hard to wrap our minds around that. Like, okay, how is that going to actually look? I figured at least the environments would look great. I mean, that's the biggest thing about Forza Horizon now, especially. It's just about photorealistic if you just look out into a landscape. But how would that translate over to maybe NPC characters that have to at least be somewhat expressive? Because the character models for the people in Forza Horizon aren't necessarily on the level of the environments or the cars. But after this trailer, I think they might have something here with this. And it turns out ForzaTech maybe a bit more robust than we were expecting. Now, this is, as they call, a new beginning. That means we can view it as a full-on reboot of the franchise. And you do start out the game as a child, just like in previous Fable games. So I want to note that they do pull a lot from some of the older Fable titles. And for me, out of those three, the second Fable game is the most memorable and my favorite game. But I went back and attempted to play it a bit. I fired it up here on the Xbox Series, and it's not great. It's very slow almost in terms of responsiveness, and there's this annoying like blur effect for everything. So unfortunately, it doesn't have FPS boost. It has auto HDR, but it's kind of a slog to play right now on console. And I'm not really expecting Microsoft to go back and add FPS boost at this time because it seems like their backwards compatibility department that was reformed is mostly looking towards next generation. So I don't know, maybe there's something that's like across the board for all of previous games through the years, the generations that it can be applied to. But at least for now, not a great experience necessarily, but we have this new Fable game to look forward to. So after you start out the game as a child, you do have your heroic abilities and powers that are discovered. There's a large catalyst, and then everything sets off with a time jump to where you end up in this big open world Albion. And I will say, it seems like there's an opportunity for that big walkout Skyrim moment, we can say, or Oblivion moment, where you're confined in an area, whether it's a dungeon or a town, for an hour or more, and then all of a sudden you step out into this massive world. And I kind of think that's what they're setting this whole thing up for, because their open world Albion is completely seamless according to them. And to compound on top of that, they mentioned that there is a full emphasis on just exploration, how you want at your pace, with no ticking time bomb. That's what they said, in the sense that, oh, you have to go do this quest in this amount of time, or the game ends, or there's some serious consequence that you can't reverse. Nothing like that. So you can just go out and explore and do what you want. And so with the visual style here, and I thought there was something very interesting that they mentioned, and it once again, it gives me some peace of mind with Playground at the helm for Fable, this reboot. They said that typically you'll see games like these referred to as fantasy, and they straight up say things like Witcher or Skyrim. But here, the look and the feel and the tone they're going for is fairy tale. And yeah, that that's how they should be going about it with something like Fable. So when you see some of the goofy characters or the enemies or even some of the dialogue that's spoken, think about it more in the sense of fairy tale rather than fantasy. Oh, and character customization is in. Not really sure how specific it is or how far you can push the customization because they kind of just jumped around to different presets in the overview trailer. So we'll have to put a pin in that one and see how far you can push this thing when it comes out. Now, for combat, melee, ranged, and magic are all available. They did say that they had at least the idea to weave these different styles together, and that was important to them. So maybe you go into you have a combo with a sword that then backs out and you throw a fireball, and it's very smooth looking. The animations don't look kind of broken up. And I do like that idea of you can sort of make your own combos almost and incorporate magic or ranged, or maybe you want to combo more melee and range. So I like that sense of customization for the combat side, but there is still more we need to know about the progression system for leveling abilities, your character, learning new spells and moves. But this was shown in the trailer. There was friendly fire between enemies, and I do like that because it sounds like it would result in all kinds of funny things that would happen along with all kinds of chaos. The most controversial thing so far coming out of this big presentation has to be the morality system. With previous Fable games, there was basically a slider for good versus evil, and depending on how far you go in one direction, could even affect your appearance to where you have a halo over your head, or very infamously, you grow horns. And that's a lot of people were just evil and wanted to grow horns. I remember back on the original Xbox, it was one of the craziest. It was kind of mind-blowing to see your character appearance change based on what you were doing in that game. Like it was really cool. One of my friends was like super evil. I wasn't to that degree yet in the game. I say yet because I saw his character with these massive horns. I was like, that looks cool. So now I'm gonna just go start messing everything up so I can be evil. But here for Fable with Playground Games, little different. Your appearance will not change, and it's going to be more about individuals, these NPCs, their opinions about you and your actions, because not everything is going to be seen in black and white. There's going to be this emphasis on a gray area. And you do need these different NPCs. At least somebody has to witness what you're doing. If you just get away with it by sneaking around and stealing, then you won't be viewed in a negative light because no one actually viewed you doing it. However, some could see stealing as maybe being altruistic, to where you're robbing because you have no other choice, and then maybe you're even like Robin Hood, where you're taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Yeah, there are NPCs that'll probably see that as a good thing or even just noble. And then it seems to go a bit further with each settlement. They'll see you differently. So one settlement, you could be the knight in shining armor, and then another one that's maybe miles and miles off into the distance, you could be the worst scum ever. Like, so you can lead double lives, triple lives, quadruple lives. The way they're really talking about this, it seems that you could have all different identities across the land. And for me, I like the idea of your appearance being noticeably different depending on if you're good or bad, but that would also affect how people would see you outright across settlements without even knowing you. So I guess if for what they want to go for here, it doesn't make sense for you to end up looking like a devil if you maybe want to lead a good life, say a more positive life in one part of the land. But still, that was just something that always stuck out to me and felt, I guess I could say, even next gen back then, going from like a PS1 or an N64 to the original Xbox, which already seemed like a massive jump into alien technology with this reactor-like system. But seeing something like Fable being possible, it legitimately felt like, wow, okay, this is definitely a new generation, because there's no way this would have been possible before. To stick with those NPCs here for a minute, they say there's 1,000 or more NPCs, and they all have unique roles and routines. And so with each of these settlements, they needed enough houses and beds for all the NPCs. That's something that was realized in development. In fact, they had a quote here in that interview with the game director saying, early in development, we couldn't work out why one town was so empty during the day. And when we zoomed out into debug mode, it was because NPCs were getting up to go to work, but they lived too far away from their jobs. So they started walking to work, but didn't get there before their schedule told them to turn around to go back to bed. So they had people who were trying to commute on foot, and couldn't get there in time. And that, oddly enough, is pretty good commentary on everyday life now I think about it. The living population apparently is lightly linked to the main quest, so it's not going to have heavy involvement in whatever the main story is, and that's something they still need to expand on a bit here because they were very careful not to get into heavy amounts of details as to what the big driving force is here in this game for your character in this world. But whatever decisions you're making in that main quest line doesn't seem to be something that will have major influences or changes when it comes to some of these NPCs. That's not to say side quests that you go on couldn't have impacts in the world, as apparently there are some that are like world altering. As they mentioned, the one quest line where a person finds a concoction that makes them a giant, and if you decide to kill them, they'll fall backwards into the land and just be dead there in a field, which will lower the property value of some of the neighboring buildings. And that then brings me to the idea of this economy that they're putting into the game, the idea that you can buy property, you can run shops, you can become a landlord if you want. You can kick all these NPCs, I guess, out into the street and make them homeless. There's also an entire system around marriage and having kids, and they mentioned you can have a ton of them, so you could have 100 some odd kids and roam the land and just keep reproducing over and over and over again. So the thing with this is there are so many promises that are being made for this game. It kind of reminds me of the original Fable when there were a lot of promises made for that game, and it didn't necessarily like live up to those promises. So that's one of the reasons I'm kind of reserved a bit. I obviously the game needs to come out so we can really judge it and see how much of this they were able to actually do. But if they're able I'd say nail 80% of what they're putting out there right now, I think they got something here. And that's what's so intriguing to me, because Playground Games stepping out of their comfort zone, not making, I mean, they are making a Forza Horizon game, Forza Horizon 6, which looks great, but also then saying, what else can we do? I don't know. Let's try to revive Fable, and let's see what the ForzaTech engine can do here, and let's see what our developers can do with something that's not a racing game, an action-adventure RPG that has narrative-driven elements, that's based on a franchise that was beloved, yes, 15 or 16 years ago, but was still one that people have in memory as an absolute classic. So I at least applaud them for being ambitious, but we got to see when it comes out. I will say, though, they're smart to launch it on Xbox, PC, and PlayStation 5, as we already know Microsoft's strategy now is, you know what, whatever, we're putting these games as many places as we can. So there was word that there's consideration for a Switch 2 port. We'll see if that ends up panning out, but I have a feeling that Playground Games is going to have a pretty good 2026. Forza Horizon 6, I figure, is going to do incredibly well. It's probably going to review high. It's going to have a bunch of people checking it out. And then if Fable comes out the way it's looking right now, could be another situation of Playground Games hitting with, I mean, Forza never gets nominated for Game of the Year, but maybe some Game of the Year contenders. We'll see with how the Game Awards treats a racing game again this year. But let me know what you guys think about Fable down below in the comments. Again, a lot of promises being made here, but I was super impressed by the showing, and this is one of my most anticipated games for 2026 at this point. We just need to hear more about the main story, weapons and progression system, the exploration even of the open world, and I figure we're going to hear more about that in a few months, especially as we get towards the summer, and then they push towards their big autumn 2026 release. Might want to get that out before GTA 6, so I'm thinking maybe a good September or October release for Fable. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.